Okay, so this comparative essay questions, know your enemy. So just roughly, for a comparative essay, there are basically 4 different essay types. 1 idea, 2 ideas, and that can be with or without quotes as we go on. So the simplest and the easiest approach is the single idea question. We'll look at one as an example and show how we would approach it on a SAC or an exam. So the question says, compare the ways in which characters in tracks and Into the Wild seek to discover what really matters to them. So our key idea or our single idea is what really matters. To look at that, you'd sort of pull it out and you'd think of 3 ways you could break that into specific groups, which would give you a bit of structure for your own actual analysis of the thing. So I don't know, not knowing the text that closely, I would say, let's say it's, money, love, and friends. Pretend those are your 3 big ideas, then you sort of run alongside examples from each of the texts and compare and contrast style and so on and so forth. If we just look down at the bottom here, you can see gender inequality, belonging, and women's views of other women are the other examples we've got there. So a single idea is quite easy, it's quite simplistic. It doesn't really lend itself to amazing analysis, and you have to do a lot of the work yourself by forming these groups and branching it out. Alright, the next one is obviously 2 ideas. We'll read one for an example. Compare how in tracks and Into the Wild the natural environment is both welcoming and hostile. So this could almost be 3. Your core is the natural environment, and then you're either saying is it yes or no, welcoming or hostile for each thing. And so to look at that, you might look at different natural environments, or you could just group them into those that are welcoming or those that are hostile. So whether you want to take the 3 approach of 1, 2, 3 body paragraphs, or if you want to say it's mostly hostile, you could do 2 on hostile and say 1 on welcoming, or vice versa if you wanted to do it the other way around. So if you were thinking, okay, well the natural environment is mostly welcoming, you do 2 on that and 1 on hostile. Let's just look at another one for an example. Compare how the Crucible in Year of Wonders explores issues of victimization and blame. So you could conflate these or compound them into one, but I would encourage you, if there's 2 ideas or if they've given 2 words for a similar concept, keep them separate and approach them as 2 separate ideas. In a more granular way at the types of questions that we've got these 4 categories. So character-based, thematic, views and values, and structural, and they're assigned by level of difficulty. So from last year's exam, there were 3 character-based prompts, and these just obviously focus on characters and often how the characters relate to key ideas. The thematic prompts are the ones you'll practice the most in the lead up to your SAC or exam, and they are pretty straightforward, just 1 or 2 different themes that you get to talk about, and you go into detail about how they relate, how they compare, how they contrast, of course. Views and values are very similar to the thematic prompts, but they're subtly different in the way that they're often tied directly to people. So where I said these are characters and these are big ideas, views and values is somewhere in the middle between how people and views and values go together. And as you can see, there were 2 from last year's exam. There were none from the structural section, but that doesn't mean there won't be in the future. And these ones are really focused on structure and writing style. So it might be something like, how is an idea explored through the text? That's probably more thematic, but it'd be a focus on authorial style and the structure of each piece. So in terms of character-based prompts, here are some examples. So let's look at this middle one. People were crazy with pain and secrets from Stasi land, and if you want to keep a secret, you must also hide it from yourself. It's worth noticing they'll always give you the text that each one's from, so they're not trying to trip you up or trick you into, quoting from the wrong text or saying that a quote is from the wrong text, because often the reason the texts have been picked is because they are so similar. So obviously the quotes could quite easily be from one text or the other if you weren't that familiar with it. So compare how secrets affect the characters in these texts. So not surprisingly, the word character exists in each of these questions, and this one uses the word individual. So if you see the word character, individual, or any other personal pronoun, that's a pretty good indication that it's a character-based prompt, which should be a good way to tell you, okay, for this sort of question, I'll be wanting to list different characters from each text. comparing them up, and linking them based on the key idea that we have. So this is asking us to focus specifically on characters, where no doubt the thematic questions are asking you to focus mostly on themes. So character questions, you're talking about individuals and life's challenges, or you're talking about characters and secrets. So, here are your characters here, and then your secrets would be alongside, and you think about how you could combine them, collate them, and put them into meaningful contrasting lists. Thematic prompts, not surprisingly, we're focusing on themes. The question is, as always, how many themes are there? These two are cut off, but as you can see, there are 10 thematic prompts, and obviously the themes are quite clear. Victimization and blame, again, is another easy example. Revenge, forgiveness. So most of them are double, 2 different themes, but the single ones, like I said, you'll be wanting to break off into as many pieces as you think are fitting. Alright, views and values, a little bit harder. So you can see the connection that is between the characters and the world and the theme. So it is possible to never feel completely at home in a new country. Compare how these 2 texts examine this possibility. So this is just like, could be seen as a bit of a general statement that you could apply to yourself, the wider world, as well as the text. So it's sort of opening the question up. It's not limiting you to one theme or one character or one key idea. It's saying, this prompt contains a whole different thing. The feeling of completely at home, so there's lots of, modality to it. You could agree or disagree or say yes sometimes but never completely, or any variation on that. And then it just says how examine this possibility. So you're talking about the text, but it's very open air, and it's available for you to consider a whole bunch of different things. Second one, compare the ways that women view other women in both Bombshells and the Penelopiad. So this goes beyond simply characters, and you could talk about women generally, their role in society, women generally in today's society, all those sort of things. So you can see how it's kind of exploded outwards rather than a simple character prompt. Structural prompts, so there's none in last year's. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be familiar with how to approach it when you see it, but I don't have any great examples for you here. For structural prompts, you're looking at the way things are explored. So it won't necessarily give you a key idea, but it'll ask you how those 2 texts are not compared, but how they're created differently. Alright, so how to interact with quotes. I'll just read this first and I'll take you through it. So you don't need to use the quotes directly in your piece, so the quotes from the question that is. But as we've done through the piece, you would highlight the quote and you would pull out some keywords, maybe add some context to it from where it happened in the text, who said it, and sort of use that as a bit of a guide. So obviously if they're giving you a specific quote, you could use that as a bit of a hint. Okay, they probably want me to focus on the character who said it, the context where it happened, as well as the key ideas. So it's, again, exploding out the question into as many possible approaches that you could take. So this is inferential meaning, so you're kind of starting to work out what they're suggesting that you could say, rather than just taking their word for everything. As it says here, if you're not instantly familiar with the quote, probably steer clear from the quote question. Hopefully there's one that doesn't have quotes. Otherwise, just if you really have no idea what the quote is, let's pretend it's here, you would just sort of pull out keywords and otherwise neglect the quote in its original form and look for the key thematic ideas instead. Alright, so I hope the key learnings from this are that theme questions are the most common and should be the ones you practice most naturally, and you should always be bringing back the theme to what you're talking about. Quotes allow you to really take questions in a lot of different directions and really explode it out. Essay questions with 2 ideas force you to be a little bit more critical and comparative, because a simple single idea question is a lot easier and limits your response a little bit. And structural essay questions are rare, but they're very good in the way that they force you to comment on the more complicated levels of analysis, which is something you should definitely practice doing in your essay, regardless of whether you get one of those questions or not. Alright, good luck.